You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi guys, it's me again, Steve Adams on Mighty Blue, and you are listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. This week's a pretty special week for me. Not only do I have one of my friends from last year as my main guest on the show, but I'll also be introducing a new sponsor for the next few weeks. And I can officially brand this show as a million download show. Yep, last Saturday morning on the beach at 10:14 a.m, you can tell I was checking, can't you? I hit refresh on my downloads page and the clicker went from 999,994 to 1,000,003. Awesome! I know that I mentioned it last week and I don't really want to go on about it again, but thanks from the bottom of my heart for all of your support over the years. Some of you have been with me from the start, some are only just tuning in, but whichever you are, I'm grateful to you for all of your downloads, your 5-star reviews, your financial donations, and your beautiful, simply beautiful emails. This show means something to you, and it shows in the love and support that you send me. This week we've got another of my class of 2019 friends. Molly Rhoads, or Sharktooth, was actually on the show when I was hiking last year. She was hiking with my buddy Nate Stockton, and we spoke about a rather unusual encounter she had had with a millipede. Some of you may remember it, but don't worry if you don't, or if you're new to the show, because Molly tells that story again. She'll be on in a moment. It wasn't until Wednesday morning that I was able to catch up with Bounce again, and luckily he had service. Though it was a little spotty every now and then, so he'll be on after Molly. And tough to believe, I know, but Grandma Gatewood goes for her third AT hike. That'll be at the end, as usual. But before all that, there's this. When I used to get up in the morning on the Appalachian Trail, I would have sacrificed my firstborn for a good cup of coffee. Instant was a bit, blah, but how much more satisfying it would have been to have had some backcountry beanbags from Triple Crown Coffee. They do a light, medium and dark roast. In fact, you can get a mixed 6-pack of their 3 flavours, named, not surprisingly, after the 3 trails in the Triple Crown, the AT, the PCT and the CDT. I love the backcountry beanbags because they are perfect for your favourite 2-cup stove and they make a proper 16-ounce cup of joe. Alternatively, you can cold soak them overnight and try it that way. Check them out at triplecrowncoffee.com. You won't be disappointed and you'll never want to drink instant coffee again. Yep, Chris Perello, who was our guest last week, decided that he'd like to support the show and will be on for the next 4 weeks. In case you were wondering, I have zero interest in having a sponsor whose products I or one of my fellow Hiking Radio Network hosts can't vouch for. In this case, I asked Chris to send me his coffee and I liked it. Simple as that. Don't worry, you won't be getting any ads from Tommy John Underwear or ZipRecruiter from me. That is a promise. Now is Molly, or Sharktooth. Today's guest is Molly Rhoads, or Sharktooth. She's another young woman I met on the trail last year and somebody I spent some time hiking around. So, hey Molly, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. And I believe, I may be wrong, my recollection is that we met somewhere around Harper's Ferry soon after your millipede incident. And I'd been hearing about this incident on the trail. I'm going to come back to it later because it was awful. But as I normally do on these interviews, I'd like to start by finding out why you wanted to do the AT in the first place. Had you been a hiker for some time?
Yeah. I've been hiking all my life, but I've been through hiking since 2017.
All right. So that was the ambition to start through hiking, was it?
Yeah. So I have a very close friend who hiked the AT in 2015, who kind of opened my eyes up to through hiking. And we did the long trail together in 2017. And the first day I hated it, but by the last day I absolutely fell in love with it and just knew that I had to keep through hiking.
What was it about it in the first place? You said she opened your eyes to it. What was her experience and how did that resonate with you?
Well, she loved it, and she would share all these pictures and call me and tell me all these awesome stories. And I knew that I enjoyed hiking and camping. So it was just kind of something that I thought I would love, and I did.
So I know it shares about 100 miles with the AT. So you do the 100 miles of the AT and Long Trail together. Then at Vermont, somewhere near the Long Trail Inn, I think it turns off, the AT turns off because I think the Long Trail was the original trail, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And it turns off. How different is it, the northern part, once you leave the AT part?
It's pretty rugged. It reminds me of a lot of my experience with Maine, just all the routes and the alpines, getting in that, like, I wouldn't say like high elevation, but you're definitely like just going up and down the mountains. So I honestly think that the northern part of the Long Trail was harder than any part of the AT.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, maybe not the whites.
Was it as accessible as the rest of, the AT? Certainly, it's always accessible, isn't it? You could always get off there's always a road you can get off and so on. What was that like on the Long Trail? Did that become different?
It is accessible, but the roads are less traveled because the roads that you're getting in is pretty like rural Vermont. So there's a lot less cars. So if you're trying to get places, you might not get a hitch. You might. It was kind of a toss up, but it's definitely accessible. There's not a lot of water.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
When did you do it? You said 2017, but what month?
So I started September, and the first 6 days it rained, but by the time we got up to the north, the water was very, very limited. I think that I waited a few hours for a rock, like water dripping off of a rock into my bottle.
Oh my gosh.
Because I heard from a southbounder, and this is going up Bolton before Mount Mansfield in the northern part of the Long Trail. And I met a southbounder who was just like, yeah, there's no water at the shelter you're going to. You might want to get it before. And that was the only water I could find.
And are the shelters the same sort of setup as you get on the AT?
Yeah, they're all lean-tos.
Are they? As comfortable then.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're pretty similar.
Now I remember on the AT you were a tenter, weren't you? Did you try? Were you tenting on the Long Trail as well? Or did you try hammocking?
No, I tented. There's plenty of space to hammock. There's a few shelters that it would be pretty hard to find some good trees, but no, I tented.
So you hated the first day. Which wasn't a great start. So what was it about it? You wanted to do this, and I know the feeling. You want to do something and you get there and it's nothing like you ever imagine it's going to be, is it? And I think that's the same with anybody who comes to any long distance trail, and you have to sort of grow into the rhythm of your hike, don't you? Is that what happened to you?
Yeah, I also started with just like way too much equipment that I didn't need, and 5 days worth of food, which is too much. And well, I met this guy, Holy Diver, and he was from Georgia and worked at Mountain Crossing.
All right.
At Neal's Gap. So he actually on the third day just like did a pack shakedown. And he's like, you don't need this or this or this. And then I started hiking. I was like, wow, I can actually like move my body better.
So how much was your pack weighing then when you started Long Trail?
Probably around like 40 pounds.
Oh my gosh, you're only about 100 pounds yourself. Oh my gosh, that must be something.
I didn't actually weigh it, but it was very heavy.
So I know I met your father. I'm not sure I actually met him. He was in his tent when I was at the same campsite as you guys, because your dad wasn't that well on the trail when I met him on the AT. Did he come because don't you come from up there?
Yes, I'm from Vermont.
Did he come and visit you on the trail, on the Long Trail?
No, not when I was doing the Long Trail, but on the AT he did.
Right. And did it ever, because I know you spent a few days hiking with him on the AT, was it ever a consideration for him to join you on your entire through hike of the AT, or was it just he was only ever going to be with you for a few days?
Well, it was supposed to be the whole way through Vermont.
Oh, really?
He was going to get off in Hanover.
Right. And what happened?
Well, he had a heart attack a few years back, and we didn't know, but just his body wasn't absorbing potassium, so he was just like very tired and very weak, and it was just like unable to really do many miles in a day. But it must have been a shock,
because I think the AT is a shock for anybody of any physical condition, isn't it? Really, the fittest, the least fittest will find it as a shock when they first get exposed to the AT.
Yeah, exactly. So he'd been like training, I guess, like working out and exercising, and just when we got there, he just wasn't in a healthy spot, healthy enough to
Right,
do it.
right. And you were able to get him off the trail, yeah.
We were, yeah. It was scary for me being his daughter,
bet.
because I was really worried about him, and I didn't really know what was going on, and he didn't really know what was going on, and he was having a hard time doing a few miles. So I was like, I don't know if I'm going to have to like call somebody to like airlift him out of here or something. But no, we got him to a road crossing, and my mom and brother actually were able to drive down and pick him up.
Cool. It all works out. That's fine.
And he's good. He's healthy, and he's doing a lot better.
but he won't be coming hiking with you anytime soon.
Probably not. No. He does short little day hikes, but I don't think that a long through hike is in his future.
Now, the reason we met in the first place was due to a mutual friend, my buddy and your goofball of a hiking partner, Nate Stockton, otherwise beautifully named as Turd Ferguson.
Yes.
How did you end up hiking with a bloke in his 40s, and particularly that bloke?
So on my first night at the AT at Hawk Mountain Shelter, I met this guy named Turtle, who was a little bit older than me. I think he's kind of like in between me and Turd's age. And then
I love that you call him Turd, by the way.
It's weird. It's uncomfortable for me to call him Nate because I'm just so used to it.
Right.
Like I have to like really think, be like, okay, call him Nate. All right, Nate.
Yeah, and let's face it, when you look at him, he looks like Turd, doesn't he? I mean...
He does. It suits him. It suits him perfectly. So he had met Turtle, the guy I was hiking with, right outside of Hot Springs, North Carolina. And they kind of talked and bonded a little bit. And he, when Turtle introduced him, he was like, Shark Tooth, you'll love this guy. His name is Turd. And I was just like, oh, that's hilarious. And so Turd was kind of hiking with me, Turtle, and a few other guys. And Turtle had to get off for a little bit. Then another one of our friends got off, and Turd was kind of just like stuck with me. So I was like, you can't leave me now.
And I've seen this. Were you happy to go? You went on the trail on the AT by yourself, didn't you? Started by yourself. Was it a conscious thing to hike with other people, or were you nervous about it when you started? How did you feel about it when you got started?
I kind of wanted to meet other people right away. I have full ability that I can take care of myself and be like extremely independent. It's the hitchhiking to get like resupply that scared me. So I kind of just like wanted to meet people that I could catch a ride with.
But have you noticed that? That a lot of young women do that? They end up with a group of, and we've had one recently who was hiking with a group of 5 or 6 guys. Mm-hmm. That's an interesting dynamic that they don't necessarily choose. Women don't often necessarily choose to hike with other women on the trail, or does it just work out that way for you?
It just worked out that way for me. By the end of it, I met a few women, Cushy Life and Mooney, who I ended up summiting Katahdin with, and they were wonderful. At the time, I just kind of like met a bunch of guys that I vibed well and hiked well with, and it was never I want to hike with guys, not girls. It just ended up, for me personally, it just ended up being that I get along better with guys. Would
you have minded hiking alone, or did you ever spend any nights camping alone? Were you worried about that?
I didn't camp alone anytime, but there was a few days that I kind of just like needed my space. So I'd like fall back or kind of like hike a little bit faster than I normally would, just kind of spend the day hiking alone. But I never had to camp alone, no.
Right. It's one of those, so you still never camped alone?
Mm-mm.
Right. It's just one of those things. I mean, when I first did it, I was 61 years old. I remember I was 406 miles into my hike, and I had to hike I had a camp one night at a place called Camp Fuzzy Legs. I didn't like the sound of that at all. And as the sun was going down, I remember I was thinking, and I can hear it in my voice actually in the video I took of it, I'm not sure this is what I really want to do. And there's no alternative. You can't camp out, you can't hike out. So you just got to get on with it, haven't you?
Just got to deal with it.
I'm sure it happens sometime. Now, and it was through meeting. Actually, before we move on to this bit, what was it like to hike with Nate? Because he was, whenever I saw him, he was laughing all the time. So he must have driven you crazy.
He did. It was good and bad. We definitely fought like siblings. We definitely had our differences in some regards. So we kind of just like had an unspoken rule that we would not talk about them, such as like politics and stuff like that. So taking that out of the equation, we were kind of just goofy and joked around. So it was really good, but it was definitely like, I feel like it was like a brother-sister relationship. Like I wanted to kill him sometimes. But sometimes he would just like make me crack up, and I'd be like, I'm so glad I'm hiking with you. He was also like very protective and in like a nice way. Like if I got hurt or anything, he would like run and be like, what do you need? Or he kind of knew more of what to do. I fell and hit my head once, and he was like, drink this water. We're hiking. I had to make sure you don't have a concussion, blah, blah, blah. So it was good in that regards. I mean, he definitely like took care of me if I needed.
He's a good man. He makes me crack up every time I speak to him. He really does.
So
we had these long drawn out conversations, and he was always making me laugh. But it was through Meeting Up with Nate that I got to know you, as I say, and because I'd heard. Because I was with Cushy at the time, I think, and we'd heard about this woman who'd had this millipede incident, we call it. And I know we've had you on the show actually when we met up, and I interviewed you for the for the podcast I was doing. But we've got quite a few new listeners now, so let's tell that story again. What happened, and how did you first notice it?
Okay, well, I was in the Shenandoah National Park, and it had rained all day, and then finally it stopped raining. We set up camp. We were stealth camping. So just not like we were just camping in a flat area. And for the first time throughout my hike, I left my shoes outside of my tent. The next morning we packed up, I put my shoes on. We hiked to a wayside, which is like a gas station, as you know,
Sure.
kind of like, as you know, but I felt something weird in my shoes. I kind of just blamed it on the fact that my shoes have gone 900 miles and they were falling apart, or, my shoelaces could have been in there. I didn't really think anything of it. And then a few hours later, I noticed, I was like, okay, I need to fix whatever's in my shoe. So I pull it out. I still think it's my shoelaces, and I look at my hands. It's this giant millipede, and I just throw it on the ground. Me and Turd fall down laughing. We think it's the funniest thing ever. And then probably about like 30 minutes later, I noticed that like my toe was kind of sore, just like I had stubbed it. So I went to the bathroom in this wayside, and I took off my sock, and my whole toe was black. Yeah. And I go out and I tell Turd, and he's just like, well, wash your foot. I was like, okay. Yeah, I was just like, maybe you're right.
Yeah, medicine may not be a strong suit then.
so I go in, I'm washing my foot. I go back out, and I'm just like, no, I need you to look at my toe. And he's like, okay. And then he takes one look at my foot. He's like, yeah, I need to call park ranger. We need to get you out of here. And some people...
Was it hurting to walk on it at all?
It didn't hurt to walk, but it felt like I had stubbed it, like it was sore. But I could move it, walk around on it. It wasn't so much of an issue. I was just kind of like, what's happening? Like, why is my toe black? Turd was kind of freaking out, running around. None of the phones worked at the wayside, so which is comical. The emergency phones.
Yeah. There should be a clue in the title: emergency phone. Yeah.
And people will just walk by and be like, "What happened?" And be like, "I don't know. There was a millipede in my shoe, and I guess it bit me or something." And these people were like, "You need to go to a doctor." So they drove me 30 miles, I think it was, to an urgent care. I spent probably 30 minutes in the urgent care until someone looked at me, saw my foot, and was like, you need to go to the ER. Like your toe is going to fall off.
But didn't they?
Great.
But weren't they confused themselves? Weren't both places you go to confused by what had happened, and they turned to our normal source of information, didn't they?
Well, urgent care sent me to the ER. The ER Googled what to do with me. They had no idea.
That must have filled you with confidence.
I mean, it was just like, I can just do this myself. If you're going to charge me $800, I'd rather just Google myself what to do. But they also called poison control. So they just washed my feet, which, after 900 miles wasn't the worst thing ever.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Bonus. Worth $100 of anybody's money, that is.
Yeah. And then they told me to go get hydrocortisone cream and prescribe me an antibiotic in case my toe got infected. And then I got back on trail the very next day. I just would try and keep my foot as clean as I could with baby wipes, and I put the cream on, and my skin just turned really hard and like a dark red and kind of just like flaked off like a blister. And then that was the end of it.
Well, when I saw you, it was about 100 miles later, and it was still pretty manky, pretty nasty. I still got the photos on my phone.
It took a very long time to go away, but yeah, it was still black. It was black for about
was it ever
a few
painful,
weeks.
or did it still feel like a stub toe?
No, it was never really painful after the fact. When they washed it and they poured hot water on it, it burned. It burned so bad, like it was excruciating, like it was like scalding hot water. But that was it. And then millipedes don't bite; they secrete toxins when they get upset. So being in my stinky shoe for a few hours definitely really upset it. I was wiggling my toes and stomping around. So, and the socks that I was wearing are still stained black.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh!
Been through like 100+ washes, and they're still black.
That is amazing, isn't it? So, did anybody ever find out what the problem was, or was it just it's a toxin? It's on your skin. It's probably not doing a lot of good for your outer skin. But it's probably wasn't getting inside you, was it?
It didn't ever. I don't think it had ever affected me. My toe's fine now.
Yeah,
but yes, while the ER was Googling it, I also was Googling it. So it's called a millipede burn, and it is they just secrete toxin. So
all right. Well, I left my boots out of my tent every single night. And I must admit, when you told me what had happened to you, I did think about it a few times, but I never found anything in there. But I always turned them upside down in the morning.
Yes, it is very important because in New York, I did that, and there was a spider like this big in my shoes. It's just like, I'm so glad I checked my shoes now. Oh my God.
That's funny. Now, as I have done a few times recently, and I'm not being lazy over this, but I reached out to our mutual friend, Nate, and asked him a few questions to ask you because he spent more time with you than anybody else. Mm-hmm. But he was surprisingly sensible. So,
good.
Yeah, so he would text me every time he thought of something. He said, "Hey, Steve," so I'll go with exactly what he said. I think you should ask her the changes in her gear for sure, and why she's trying to go light when she used to love bragging about the weight she carried.
I wouldn't say it was bragging. I just thought that I was really badass because I was like this little girl whose pack was heavier than all these big men that I was hiking with. But no, I did. Well, I changed my tent, my sleeping bag, and my backpack, actually, all of them. And it was just because there's times that my sleeping bag was a 0 degree Ethel by Big Agnes, and it was just like it's like 4 pounds itself. And my backpack, it was the Osprey, and it was 65 liters, and it's also very heavy. And my tent just has a bunch of holes in it.
Well, that doesn't help. That
from wear and tear. So I just kind of, in the future, I'd like to hike the PCT, and I was kind of just taking steps now to kind of figure out what gear I can kind of get down.
And so we're going to come to in a minute what you're doing next, which is very soon. But so you're packed now with everything in it. What would it be? Or if you went on now, and to be fair, you're not comparing like with like if you go to the PCT because you have to carry a lot of water. But say you're preparing for the AT, what do you think you'd be going out with now? What size?
I haven't weighed it with like food and water in it, but my base weight is about like 18 pounds.
That's fine. Yeah. That's fine. Yeah. Whole lot less than it was on the long trail. His next one was. And the next text that he sent me a few minutes later was, "Don't let her tell you she didn't use trekking poles. She had one for a few hundred miles." I'd forgotten you didn't use poles. Firstly, why did you say you didn't use poles when you actually had one?
Well, I didn't use poles for a while until about mile 850, where one of my friends, Tequila, gave me one of his trekking poles. The reason I didn't use them on the long trail, and I didn't feel like I needed them, but the reason I didn't use them on the AT is because when I was younger, I broke my elbow. So, getting too much movement in it starts to make it sore.
Oh, wow.
So I just thought that I wouldn't need them. But by the time Tequila gave me his pole, my knees and ankles were hurting a lot, like my joints. And I fell so often that I was hiking with one pole, and it kind of just became like a kickstand for me. But I did buy a set of poles that my tent requires.
Right.
And I am going to use them for my next adventure because my joints are a lot happier when I use them.
You're a young girl. What are you? How old are you? You're in your early 20s? Mid-20s?
I am 29, actually.
Oh, 20, wow, 29.
Yeah, I just
okay.
turned 29.
Happy
Yeah.
birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
And ask her about her preparation changes between her 2 hikes. So does that mean preparation? I mean, I think as with Nate, I'm not sure what he's talking about there. Did you make much do much training for either of the hikes?
No. I mean, I always hike at least like once or twice a week because that's just something I enjoy.
Right.
But no, I for the AT, I didn't even look at a guidebook until the night before. And
good preparation.
Like,
as much as me.
Yeah, and I was just like, I should figure out what shelter to go to. So I just picked Hawk Mountain Shelter because I did not do the approach trail on the AT. Right. I'll be honest about that. So it's the first shelter. Nothing
to do with the AT, is it? It's not on the AT. So yeah, who cares?
No, but a lot of people who did it give me shit about it, being like, it's a rite of passage. I'm like, well, I didn't do it.
Yeah, go ahead, enjoy. Yeah, knock yourself out. And then the next day, Nate sent me one more. He said, "Hey, Steve, ask her about the trail angels and friends that said they would help her on the trail."
Yeah, so I took to social media to kind of post that I was doing my next adventure, another hike in Colorado, the Colorado Trail, and a lot of people who I hiked on the AT with reached out and were like, "Hey, I'm in Denver. Let me know if you want to ride to the trailhead or if you need somewhere to stay for a few days, or like just let me know about everything when you're on the trails." And my friend who inspired me to start through hiking is actually living in Durango, where the trail ends for me. Yeah. And so she's also, like, I'll drive anywhere. And I'll hike with you for a couple days. If you're lonely, I'll bring you and your trail family beer, like, or food or anything. So a lot of people have reached out, which is awesome.
There's something about the trail, isn't it? That draws people together. There was a young girl who was on my show a couple of years ago now, Kelly, and she came to my house for lunch one day when my wife was there, and she made us lunch, and my wife said, "I'm just going to go out now." She said, "I couldn't understand anything you're talking about." You know what I mean, don't you? You talk about something that nobody else seems to get, and Kelly and I were just talking about 2 or 3 hours because we just have that. There's a commonality of interest, isn't there? There's something that's happened to you that those people you met on the trail are always going to be special to you. So I think that's probably what it is. And the fact that they want to support you now on your next hike is great as well. Mm-hmm. And we hiked and camped around each other for, I don't know, about the next 3 or 4, maybe 500 miles before you moved ahead of me and Trigger. Tell us about your experience in the Whites and Maine. Was it what you expected?
The Whites, I kind of like psyched myself up. Like, this is going to be so hard. I don't know if I can do it. And it was around Vermont that I was meeting the southbound AT hikers. And they're like, "No, you're fine. Like, you can do this. Like, you're definitely not going to hike as many miles as you were, but you'll be fine." So I was just kind of really scared. And then when I got into them, it was definitely very hard. I definitely slowed down a lot and was doing less miles, but I got through it, which was great. And the views are so beautiful. Yeah, you just see so many mountains around you. And then same with Maine. With Maine, you can just see forever for miles. And Maine, I kind of felt like I was back, like, in Vermont, like I said, with all, like, the alpine and all the moose poop and
it's almost like the moose have their own toilet, don't they? They know exactly where everybody else goes. So there's tons of it, isn't there?
Oh my God, I've never seen so much moose poop in my life. It is just like all over the trail. Well, funny enough, somebody made, I think it was 1,900 miles. Somebody made a 1,900 mile sign out of moose poop.
Oh, nice, classy.
I never figured out who it was, or they just didn't admit to it, but I thought that was hilarious.
Certainly when I went through the presidential range in 2014, I had no views at all. I had terrible weather up there. But Trigger and I had fantastic weather through New Hampshire. You were a week or so ahead of us. What was your weather like through the Whites?
It was actually really wonderful. I think that when me and Turd got up to Lafayette, we got socked in, and we were going through like 40-mile-per-hour winds, but it wasn't really rainy. I think it rained like once or twice on us through the Whites, and like maybe a handful. I mean, maybe like 3 times in Maine. It didn't really rain as much.
I don't know about you, but I think if there's one place you ever want to visit on the AT, it's Franconia Ridge, isn't it? And that whole thing, that day is just a magical day in my mind from both of my journeys, and it's something. So it's a place that I was looking forward to it so much. Second time, I was almost thinking it's going to let me down, and it just didn't.
It's wonderful.
Yeah,
it is really wonderful.
And
it's probably one of my favorite parts.
And me too. And your summit picture at the top of Katahdin was full of people that I'd met and hiked with. What was that day like for you? Now you were coming to the end. Was it something? I mean, you fulfilled what you wanted to do, which was hike the AT, and you got that moment of touching Katahdin. Was it fun to share it with all those people? Or did you actually hike together, or did you just all end up at the top together?
I hiked with most of them, and then some people, it was just kind of like met at the top. At first, it wasn't really hitting me. It was just like another hike. Started super early in the morning, and we were all like yelling at each other, like just like silly things, like Katahdin, and just like freedom, just like random things that people were screaming, just to like make it fun. But it hadn't really hit me that it was like the last hike until I got up there, took a bunch of summit pictures, and then I got off the side and just started crying.
Oh, really?
Yeah, actually, me and Turd were crying.
Well, he should have been crying over he should have been crying over the ridiculous hat he was wearing. Do you remember that that foam cowboy hat?
Oh yeah, he wore it the whole way up too. There wasn't a single moment that he took that hat off.
Oh, that's funny. But you suddenly realise it's a conclusion, and it's over very quickly, isn't it? I know you got that long climb down, and that's tough as well. But the thing you've been striving for, you've touched that sign. You're past that moment, then, aren't you? You're now looking forward to whatever happens next, aren't you?
Yeah, it was kind of like a reality check where I kind of just like, because I am very young, I kind of just thought that like, oh, I'm gonna have my whole life figured out by the time I get done the AT, and that was kind of like one of my first thoughts. It's just like I'm more confused than ever now.
That's right. You think it's funny. You start in Georgia, you think, oh, I've got all this time to think about what I'm going to do next, and suddenly it's Maine. You think, oh my God, I haven't thought about anything.
Yeah, you're just like, what am I going to do?
Yeah, it's amazing. And you told me that your costs on your AT hike was between $4,000 and $5,000. That's kind of a little on the low side. Most people say about $1,000 a month. Do you feel that you missed out on anything on that budget, or was it just right for you?
I don't think I missed out on anything. I definitely drank a lot and took I think an appropriate amount of zeros. I
wonder what you say then.
and I went swimming in the lakes and rivers and stuff, and I think I had a pretty good hike. I think that if I went back, I would probably slow it down a little bit in Georgia and North Carolina.
When did you start and finish then?
I started on March 15th and I finished August 18th. So it was about
5 months.
About 5 months.
That's a good time, though, isn't it? I mean, I took 5.5 months. I was happy with that time. I was quicker second time than I was first time, funny enough. And so the climb down, you have that climb down from the mountain. Don't you think that's incredibly tough? And you could injure yourself after you finish the Katahdin, can't you?
Oh yeah, it was brutal. It was really hard. I just remember like when I was walking down, like my body was like like I could just like hear all my bones like cracking, and yeah, it was hard, but the whole time I was just kind of thinking like, I don't really want this to end yet. Like I'm not ready.
And did you get down when you got back home? I mean, not down the mountain. Did you get down yourself? Did you sort of get a little bit post-trail depression?
Yes, I did. It didn't hit me for a few months because I guess I was just like on this high that I had just like done this like really awesome thing. And then, after about 2 months, I was back at work. Just kind of back into like the same mundane grind. And I just kind of felt like I did this cool thing and nobody else's life changed. So I was kind of like, like no one cares that I did this cool thing. Like no one thinks I'm important anymore. Like
I think I said, didn't I warn you, Molly? Didn't I say to you, I said, everybody, when you get back, everybody's going to want to hear your stories for about 3 weeks maybe, and then they're going to want you to shut the hell up, aren't they? Because they can't relate, and you've told all the stories you're going to tell.
Yeah. Even like the other day, I forgot what I was talking to a coworker and I forgot what we were talking about. I was like, yeah, it's like the Mahoosuc Notch on the AT. And she's like, you're saying that like I should know what the hell that is. And I was just like, I forgot that you have no idea.
Oh, dear. That's funny. But you got over it because you're going away again. Obviously, were you planning to do the PCT this year and you didn't go because of COVID, or you decided you want to do the Colorado Trail as your next one anyway?
Well, my plan was to do it in 2021, the PCT.
Oh, right.
I was going to go to Scotland with you and Turd and a few other people that we had met on the trail. Yeah. And because of COVID, that obviously did not happen.
Of course, yeah.
But I just kind of felt like I needed to be back in the woods. And I know that, COVID's not over and so it's still, out there and I need to protect myself and everything, but I needed to be back.
Yeah.
So I quit my job and bought a plane ticket to Colorado very quickly.
You youngsters, I love the fact you're happy to quit your jobs and just go and you always think, I'll be okay. I'll get something when I come back. So it's not a problem, is it?
Yeah, I mean, I have like serving and bartending skills, so I can always fall back on that and kind of get a job anywhere. I think it might be a little bit more difficult now, but yeah, I was very happy to quit and to get back and I've saved up money during COVID, so I just thought it was the perfect time, and especially with all these people like reaching out saying that they would help me, I was just like, all right, I'm going to do it.
That's lovely. Now, are you still planning on the PCT next year? Because I've been talking to them, we talked about possibly just putting Scotland back a year to next year. So if we're going to just still do Scotland, would you still fancy doing that?
I would definitely want to go back to Scotland, or go to Scotland again. Still, I've been kind of up and down about doing the PCT next year because I just feel like it might just be really crowded because of all the people who weren't able to do it this year.
Maybe.
So it kind of worries me, but at the same time, it's just like thru-hiking is what I love doing, and so I might as well do it while I can.
Yeah, well, that's cool. It was lovely meeting you, Molly. I must say that I've wanted you to come on the show for a little while, and I'm glad that I reached out and you're able to do it, especially just before you go away again. So when you do come back from the Colorado Trail, perhaps you'll come on and tell us about that trip.
Yeah, I would absolutely love to. I leave in a week.
That's right.
So.
In fact, you'll be leaving about the same time this airs because I've got something else next week. But then I think yes, about the same time. Yeah. So good luck in that trip, and just let me know when you're back, and we'll get on the mic and we'll talk about that one. Okay.
Absolutely, I would love to do that.
All right, Molly. Cheers then.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
She is such a great girl. That laugh was always the first thing you noticed about her. She's genuine, she's always present, and she's a badass. Love her. She's also now on the Colorado Trail. I saw a post on Facebook yesterday morning, so good luck, Molly. We'll catch up soon. As I mentioned earlier, I was a little concerned on Wednesday morning that I hadn't heard from Bounce for the week, so I texted him when I returned home from my early morning walk. As luck would have it, he was in reach, so I jumped onto Skype and we recorded. There are a few moments when his end of the call gets a bit faint, but it's otherwise fine. Here's Bounce. Right, we're back on with Bounce. Hi, Bounce. How are you?
I'm good.
So, where are you? Because we haven't spoken, and I've heard no text from you to give me any idea where you've been. So, what's going on?
So, I'm at the hostel, the Hanover Bench Hostel, and it's right on Connecticut River in Vermont. What's that town? Norwich, right across from Hanover.
Yeah.
So I made it to the co-op. Camped behind the co-op, and looked on Gut Hooks. These guys had great reviews. Like, they're very hiker friendly. So I wanted to see what it was about. So I came over here.
What's the name of the hostel again? I didn't quite catch it because the sound went funny then. So what was the name of the hostel again?
It's called the Hanover Adventure Hostel.
Is that the one owned by the older gentleman with nice...
Mr. Frosty?
Yes.
Yep. And they renovated it. It's beautiful. We had... Oh, man, like 15 hikers there last night.
Wow.
I told Blueberry I was here, and he just brought them in. It was the first time I had a hiker experience in a while, and it was fun.
Wow, that is something. So he's making a go of it because he opened last year, and we stayed there pretty early on. So I almost had a brand new bed. It was really lovely. So yeah, it's kind of nice. So what's been going on this past week? Because if you're now at New Hampshire, you've obviously finished Vermont.
Sure, yeah. So I stopped at the Yellow Deli, went around the corner. They let me shower. It's not open yet.
Right.
You know, we did Killington, and then we just made that run east right there from Rutland. Wasn't too bad. Rain was why I came inside. It was some lightning storms and stuff, but not so bad.
So, did you? I found Killington a bit of a slap round the face. You know, it shows you where things are starting to happen now, aren't they? You're starting to really get some quite difficult, more and more difficult hiking. I think going up Killington was my first reminder how high some of these mountains can get.
Yeah, it's getting serious. We talked about that last night. It's time. You can't just lackadaisically hike. You have to check the weather. You have to look at your miles. You have to check the terrain. Like it's better to be with more than one person instead of going through the whites by yourself. Like Killington kind of was a reminder of all that.
So you're hiking with somebody full time, or just as and when?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna hike out with Blueberry, and then there's a group of 7 that went out already. So We'll have those 7 in front of us, and so there's gonna be a good amount of people in the area. So I won't hike every day with anybody, but there's enough people now.
Isn't that nice to get to? I mean, I couldn't do what you've done this year, mate. You know, you've done it so alone in many ways, and I just that wouldn't be how I would personally enjoy it. In fact, we saw each other last year. You and I were past each other in Hanover, didn't we? Trigger and I were going. We hadn't seen you for some time, and you were there. Did you go to the? You're going to go to the place for breakfast at the college, or is that not open?
The college isn't open, but Lou's is open, so you can get your free donut. I already had my free piece of pizza at Raimundo's. Yeah, we definitely met again. And then you guys took off in the whites. You and Trigger just took off. I couldn't keep up after that.
No, you're joking.
No, I'm not. I remember.
That's amazing you say that. So did you slow down? You said last week you were talking about sort of taking it a little bit easier and slowing down, and you were going to go down to 13, 15 miles a day. So has that happened so far?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, when I'm hiking, I still, in a full day of hiking, I'm still, even with the good terrain, I'm right around 20, 23.
Wow.
But I've taken, really long lunches, taken time to get out of camp, slowed my water filling time so I get longer breaks. So I've done a few things to adjust my style to get me slower. Are you enjoying
it now? I mean, you've enjoyed most of it anyway, I'm sure. But are you enjoying it more now there are more people here?
I was having a rough time coming across after Rutland. I got to Rutland, I'm the only person in the Yellow Deli. Then I get to Hanover, I'm by myself. I didn't see anybody for 3 days, so it was starting to, I like to hike alone. I really love the solitude, but it was starting to become a little much.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy to see all these people.
Your own voices in your head drive you crazy, don't they? I found it myself. It's nice to have
someone else's opinion.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah. Nice to argue with somebody else, but apart from yourself. You're right. Yeah. So tell us about, and I meant to ask you this last time. Tell us about some of the earlier miles. How difficult was it to get through certain places before the maintainers came back? Because the maintainers didn't come on for about 3 months, did they? So what condition was the trail in when you went through it?
So it's interesting. Like, it depends on the section, and they're all maintained by local clubs, right?
Yes.
So
yes,
you get to one section and the trail's just like it was last year. You get to another section and they used a star bit to drill the privy shut.
Right.
So it's just one of those things. Now they're allowed to come back on. So there's been a bunch of trail maintenance in the past week.
Right.
But you would go through a lot of things touching you, a lot of low branches, a lot of blowdowns you have to walk over. I mean, nothing ridiculous, but it's not. I mean, everything's grown in a little bit. It's the grass is higher when you're walking through the grassy areas. It's high.
Nice. Oh, that's nice. Oh, that's kind of nice. Did you see more wildlife because there were less people on the trail?
Yeah, I believe so. So that's something quite interesting. Last year, remember how everybody got up at 5 or 45 is when you guys woke up, and then people were out by 5:30. This year it's 4 o'clock.
Oh my
it's
gosh, why?
4:15. Yeah, I don't know. The sun comes up earlier, and the birds start making noise at that time. It's like, you know how you have that space from the night that goes to the day?
Yes.
It's around 4:15 like this year, as opposed to, I don't understand why. I don't know.
Oh my
I don't know, but it's an hour earlier this year.
That's that brought back not nightmares, but the thoughts last year of the whippoorwill, which does not stop.
Yeah.
It is relentless, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. Sure.
So now they're back. The trail maintainers are back. Are you seeing them on the trail, and they doing much work, or is it just because I didn't see many of them last year? Because it's almost like these amazing heroes come in and sort the trail out while I'm not there overnight. Have you seen many of them on the trail?
I haven't seen many of them, but I did see a group in Massachusetts. I did get stopped by a gentleman who does trail maintenance and is, I think, in charge of the Massachusetts group.
Right.
And he wanted to know where it was. Like, so it just depends. Like, so my last experience has been very good. The Massachusetts group, they want to clean the trail right away. You know, they're ready to go.
Right. I bet they do. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So you're now coming to the final two states, which, as you know, are pretty darn difficult anyway. Are you going to be more cognizant of where other people are? Because you're right, it's quite dangerous to hike in those states. You're going to be around, it just seems, at least people, you can see people in the distance.
Yeah, well, I'm not gonna do the whites alone. So I know where the people are now, and right. I'm using, I'd like to leave in the morning after a group discussion. Somebody checks the weather. Somebody,
right.
Hearing that conversation around camp would make me feel a lot more comfortable.
Yeah,
so I'm gonna make sure I'm in that situation. I'm not gonna stealth camp by myself. I'm going to stay around the other hikers, stuff like that, until we get through this part. Yeah.
Well, you know what? You're going to have a fantastic time, as you know. I mean, it's like the cherry on the cake for me, New Hampshire and Maine. Yeah. I'm very jealous of you doing it now. And while I know that it's been a difficult ride for you, you've got more and more people coming on now, and I'm sure you'll meet people on the trail, and it's going to be great the next couple of weeks. So enjoy it, and we'll talk again next week, okay?
All right. It was great talking to you, my dude.
And you, buddy. Take it easy. Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
I can't tell you how pleased I am that Mr. Frosty's making a go of his hostel. To be honest, I think he may agree. He opened a little too soon last year and hadn't really got into his stride. The place was great, and as I said to Bounce, I slept in a brand new bed with brand new sheets, which is a pretty rare occurrence in hostels from my experience. He just hadn't quite worked out the details, and, as in so much of life, it's the details that count the most. Good for him for keeping it going, even though 2020 must have been tough for him. To have had 15 hikers there last night would have been a big boost. Before we hear about our intrepid grandma again, I want to thank all of you who continue to donate to the show. I never take these donations for granted, and every time I get a PayPal notification, my smile just perks up a bit. Thanks so much. So we are now on to Grandma Gatewood and her crazy adventures, and today we find out what happened to PC. You're going to cheer a little bit when you hear what Emma's reaction was. I'll see you next week. Chapter 20. Blazing. 1960 to 1968. She's sitting right over there. The bus terminal manager pointed across the room toward the thick Thursday afternoon crowd, the lady in the blue coat. The reporter walked through the bus station toward the 72-year-old woman wearing white gloves, a white blouse, thick glasses and a winter hat to keep her ears warm against the February cold. She seemed impatient. She'd been sitting a while. The reporter introduced himself. "If that bus doesn't come soon," she said, "I'm going to walk to Dayton." Emma was in Chillicothe, Ohio, trying to catch a ride. She had to be in Cincinnati by Saturday and wanted to visit her son, Nelson, before then. The reporter asked the standard questions, the ones she'd answered 1,000 times. Why do you hike? Why do you hike alone? How do you survive in the wild? She told him she'd been named a lifetime member of the National Campers and Hikers Association and that she was working on establishing hiking trails through the Ohio hills. A few months before, the executive committee of a non-profit called Buckeye Trail, Inc., of which she was a charter member, had received permission from the state to begin marking a trail from Lake Erie south through the Zaleski State Forest and on to Cincinnati. The blazing was expected to take 4 or 5 years. The nation's most famous trail walker, the Columbus Dispatch, had called her in a story about the effort. The reporter asked how she kept in good enough shape to blaze trails. "Exercise is most important," she said. "Too many people hop in the car or go 2 blocks for a bar of soap." "Where was she headed now?" he asked. "I've always wanted to ride on a boat," she said. A letter came to Lucy on February the 24th, 1960. Emma was aboard the Delta Queen, a Mississippi River steamboat heading from Cincinnati to New Orleans for Mardi Gras with 130 passengers from 15 states and Canada. The night before, docked in Memphis, the Delta Queen Calliope premiered. 5,000 people and the mayor of Memphis stood on the banks to listen. "It's been a nice trip so far," she wrote. "We have a masquerade party tonight." 2 months later, on April the 28th, she set out from Springer Mountain in Georgia, the new southern terminus of the Appalachian Trail, to try to complete a third AT hike. She had to abandon the hike after 75 miles at Deep Gap, North Carolina, because of a massive blowdown. It would take 100 men 3 months to cut their way through that, she told the local paper. On June the 2nd, she was photographed hiking along the 85-mile horseshoe trail near Hershey, Pennsylvania, where she had asked a group of boys if they had any food. 13 days later, on June the 15th, a reporter found her 95 miles away in Wind Gap, Pennsylvania. She told him she was headed vaguely north, maybe to Canada. "You look strong," the reporter told her. "What do you expect?" Emma replied. He asked if she kept her children in the loop with postcards. "I write to them," she said, "but I don't tell them nothing. I don't see any use in making a big fuss about it. I just do what I want to do." A week later, she was at her daughter Lucy's door in White Plains, New York, telling of the porcupine that tried to sleep on her feet and the rat she kicked away while she slept against a stone wall. 2 weeks later, a resident of Cheshire, Massachusetts, phoned the local newspaper to report that the tough-as-a-nail hiking grandmother had just left her home for the summit of nearby Mount Greylock, the highest point in the state, the peak coveted by Nathaniel Hawthorne, Herman Melville, and Henry David Thoreau. A few days later, the North Adams Transcript reported that the great-grandmother of the hiking fraternity paid for a 15-minute airplane ride so she could see the Appalachian Trail from above. 23 days later, on August the 7th, 1 year to the day from when she finished the Oregon Trail, Emma crossed the border into Canada, the long trail of Vermont behind her. There were no cheering crowds, just trees. She was happy nonetheless. She scratched out a letter and sent it to the folks back home. It was a hard trip, but in spite of all the obstacles, I stuck it out to the end. Some of those mountains are quite a challenge for one my age, and I wondered a lot of times whether I could make it, but I kept putting one foot ahead of the other until I got to Canada. I did not sleep out, as there are plenty of cabins and shelters. Only 3 times was there anyone in camp with me. There were 2 boys who started from the north, but will not go far, I imagine, as they were too lazy to get up and start in the morning. One has to work hard at it if they are to get far. I hiked alone the entire trip, but I took my time so that I did not hurt myself in any way. I saw a bear and a cub on Breadloaf Mountain. The cub went up a tree and the mother pranced around going, "Whoop, whoop." I was about 30 feet from them and they were too near the trail for me to pass. I went back and sat on a rock for a few minutes and they went away. I roasted a porcupine that I killed. I first threw him in the fire and got all the quills off, then I skinned the thing. It looked all right and did not smell bad. It had such a nice liver, so I put it on a stick and roasted it, salted it, and cut off a bite. Took 1 or 2 chews on it and spit it out. It took me 2 or 3 days to get that taste out of my mouth. I had the porky over the fire, and after the liver, my imagination got the better of me, and I dropped the thing in the fire and burned him up. Altogether, I have hiked about 700 miles this year and wore out 2 pairs of tennis shoes. I cannot see that the trip hurt me any. I'm now 72 years old and able to do a lot more hiking. In 1960, as Emma Gatewood covered the country by boat and plane, and mostly on her own 2 feet, something strange was happening. That April, 2 British paratroopers, Sergeant Patrick Maloney, 34, and Sergeant Mervyn Evans, 33, left San Francisco on a walk to New York. They aimed to make the trip in 70 days in an attempt to break the cross-country record of 79 days which had stood since 1926. This was not long after J.M. Flagler, writing for The New Yorker, bemoaned the loss of long walker Edward Weston and American pedestrians of his day. Nowadays, he wrote, "Distance, endurance and speed walking are all but lost arts in America." The pedestrian headlines were back, and the paratroopers weren't the only ones making them. Walking behind the two soldiers was Dr. Barbara Moore, a British vegetarian who embarked on the 3,250-mile walk to show that her diet of fruits, vegetables and grass juice were better for endurance than an American diet of meat and coffee. The doctor claimed that she had cured herself of leukemia with an experimental diet. She said she planned to have a baby at age 100 and live to be 150. Somewhere along the route, the vegetarian, who was accompanied most of the way by a supply-laden car, vowed to beat the paratroopers to New York. She passed them at least once out west as they slept, but the men, who swore they weren't racing, soon pulled ahead. They gained a larger lead when Moore was struck by a car and hospitalized in Brazil, Indiana. By the time the paratroopers made it to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, the vegetarian was lobbing accusations that they had cheated by hitching rides. She told reporters she had affidavits stating they had caught rides for nearly a third of the way. The two men finished in 66 days, shattering the record. Moore limped into Times Square and into throngs of onlookers after a rough 85 days of walking, complaining that the paratroopers had taken an easier route. Emma knew about the paratroopers and told a reporter that she'd like to meet them. What about Moore? Some people think I ought to make it a point to see her, Emma said, but I don't think we'd agree on anything. Something new was afoot, though. Newsweek sniffed it out the same year. A fad was sweeping the United Kingdom, distance walking. It wasn't just the vegetarian and the paratroopers. One man had walked 110 miles from Norwich to London in 30 hours. After that, 250 women representing armed forces auxiliaries walked from Birmingham to London. A chronometer factory owner in St Albans, who thought kids were sissies, challenged his 400 male employees to walk 50 miles in 15 hours. 32 tried and 16 finished. The United States was a little slow to catch on, but by 1963, distance walking was taking the country by storm. The Marines are marching. The girls are marching. Practically everyone is marching, wrote the Associated Press in February. The hoopla began when Marine Commandant General David M. Shoup unearthed a long-forgotten executive order from President Theodore Roosevelt that prescribed fitness standards for Marines. In 1908, Roosevelt felt the Marines should be in good enough shape to walk 50 miles in 3 days, with a total of 20 hours rest. Shoup sent the document to President John F. Kennedy as a historic courtesy. Kennedy wondered whether modern Marines could pass the test, and in a matter of hours, Marine headquarters issued a directive ordering a test by officers of the 2nd Marine Division at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Kennedy casually noted in a letter to Shoup that Roosevelt laid down such requirements not only for the officers of the Marine Corps, but, when possible, for members of his own family, members of his staff and cabinet, and even for unlucky foreign diplomats who were dragooned into hiking with him through Washington's Rock Creek Park. Furthermore, he wrote, if the test indicates that the strength and stamina of the modern Marine is at least equivalent to that of his antecedents, I will then ask Mr. Salinger to look into the matter personally and give me a report on the fitness of the White House staff. As soon as word of the challenge got out, people across the country, strangely, started walking, aiming at 50 miles. Boy Scouts hiked in Illinois. Secretaries sauntered in Washington, D.C. Students at Stanford University set out. Politicians looking for headlines took off with reporters trailing them. 400 high school kids in Marion County, California, tried for 50 miles and 97 of them finished, including 19 girls. Attorney General Robert Kennedy finished 50 miles in 17 hours and 50 minutes. Heel blisters became the hash marks of the new frontier, reported the United Press. Walking, an almost forgotten art in this motor-made nation, suddenly became as important as goldfish swallowing once was, read an Associated Press dispatch. The big surprise was the reaction in the infinitely mysterious chemistry of the American people, said a story in Newsweek. Citizens of all ages and conditions, mostly flabby, went after the 50-mile mark in one of the woolliest of pursuits since men first chased wild geese. In May 1963, a man named Paris Whitehead was walking along the trail in Shenandoah National Park when he looked up and saw an elderly woman walking toward him. She wore a hat, tennis shoes and a plastic raincoat. She was carrying a bundle. She was so wild-looking that he knew exactly who she was. Queen of the Appalachian Trail, Grandma Gatewood. He had heard all about her. He knew she had walked the trail twice and had slept in more homes than George Washington. He'd later tell a friend about the experience, and Ronald Strickland would write of the encounter in his book, Pathfinder. Knowing of her experience through all sections of the trail, I asked her which part she liked best. Going downhill, sonny, she replied. Late in the summer of 1964, Merrill C. Gilfillan, an Ohio conservationist who was doing a feature story for a Columbus Dispatch magazine, showed up at the Pinkham Notch Hut south of Gorham, New Hampshire. He'd arranged to meet up there with Emma Gatewood, who was trying to finish hiking the Appalachian Trail for the third time. When she didn't show the first day, he was mildly concerned. His worry grew on the second day as temperatures in the valleys of the Presidential Range had dropped below 30 degrees. The third day brought snow above the timberline and winds of 50 to 60 miles per hour. By the fourth day, he was truly alarmed. He spoke to the director of the Appalachian Mountain Club hut system, who began a radio check of the huts in an effort to find Grandma. He tried several times but couldn't track her down. The director felt it was time to ask for a search. He was just about to call the U.S. Forest Service when he found her, at Mizpah Springs Shelter, a few miles above Crawford Notch. They'd meet soon. While Gilfillan waited on her to arrive, he watched as hundreds of hikers came and went. The hut master said some 200 a day passed through. Most were college age, wearing the newest clothes and carrying the best backpacks and gear. The contrast was remarkable as Emma appeared out of the spruce and walked through the rain, wearing a sheepskin vest and serviceable gloves she'd found on the trail, and carrying her sack over her shoulder. She was recognised by the younger hikers coming through. They flocked around her, asking questions about the trail, showing honest admiration. She was damaged, though. She had fallen her first day out and hurt her knee. The injury slowed her so much she couldn't make it to shelter and slept outdoors that night. A few days later, she was attacked by a German shepherd, which bit her on the leg before she could drive it away with her stick. She still had a nasty wound. What struck Gilfillan was that she was happy. The bumps and bites didn't seem to bother her. She wore a smile and a subtle look of determination. After the hard life I have lived, she said, this trail isn't so bad. On September the 17th, 1964, having traversed again one of the most difficult AT stretches through Vermont, New Hampshire and Maine, having survived the final day of walking on bouillon cubes and a handful of peanuts, Emma Gatewood, 77, reached Rainbow Lake, a fitting place to complete her third hike, since she had walked there from Mount Katahdin 10 years before, in 1954. She was the first person to walk the entire trail 3 times. The newspapers called her the female hiking champion of the United States, maybe of the world, and the famed hiker from Ohio, and the nation's most famous woman hiker, and a living legend among hikers. As was customary, she offered criticism, saying that the trail was bad in a few spots, but fewer than the last time she'd been through. Asked why she liked to hike, she told reporters, I took it up as kind of a lark. She sold her house and used the money to buy a small trailer court back in the Gallia County town of Cheshire. The upkeep on the place was hard. Tenants left trash and rags and bottles outside, so she'd clean up and trim around the skirts with a butcher knife while they were away. When a gas mower broke down, she cut the grass with a push mower. She quilted and braided rugs and wrote letters and spoke at school assemblies and washed the windows at the Methodist church. She captured in her diary the extraordinary minutiae of a twilight. May the 19th, 1967. I took a mattock and shovel and worked on the road around the court, dug a ditch to let the water out and dug the high places into the holes. Lifted the grass around where the well was dug and wheeled 5 loads of dirt and filled in. Then put the sod back and watered it and beat it down with the shovel. Put the block of walk back in place. Spaded and planted 2 hills of cukes, 2 of pumpkins, 4 hills of peanuts. Put a fence around to keep the rabbits out. Burn the trash. Got some asparagus down the track and picked lettuce and a few strawberries. Went to the post office, fixed the underpinning, and I'm tired. She continued to travel, especially to annual conventions of the National Campers and Hikers Association, which sometimes drew 10,000 outdoorsmen, and she was routinely singled out by the press. People just can't believe an old woman is hiking, she told a reporter at the Salina Journal at a meeting in Kansas. No one would do a thing like that, they figure, unless she was getting paid for it. It's a funny thing. I work like a horse around the trailer court, but when I say I'm taking a hike, they say I shouldn't because I'm too old. I got up on the roof a while back and sawed off a tree limb, but no one said anything about that. Back home, she began marking and blazing a hiking trail through Gallia County with the idea it would one day be connected to the Buckeye Trail, proposed to run between Cincinnati and Lake Erie. She scouted and cleared some 30 miles along the Ohio River, painting trees with robin's egg blue blazes, 2 inches wide by 6 inches long. She negotiated with farmers for permission to cross their private property and built stiles out of logs and rock for climbing barbed wire fences. At 82, she could be found walking on the trail from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. alone in the woods. "They said I was too old when I tried to get a job," she told a local reporter. "Why, I've done more since I was too old than most young women." For her work, Ohio Governor James Rhoads gave her the State Conservation Award at the Ohio Achievement Day celebration at the fairgrounds in Columbus. She then flew to Fontana Dam, North Carolina, where she was a special guest at Fall Colors Hiking Week. Even with all the attention and honours, she continued to find peace in nature all by herself. She would stalk the countryside in search of rare flowers or a dogwood in full bloom. "I went to the hills today looking for wild crab apples," she wrote to her daughter. "I found trailing arbutus all over the place and a deep wooded gorge I would like to explore." P.C. Gatewood fell ill in 1968. In his old age, he had been a doting grandfather and had served as mayor of the tiny village of Crown City for several terms. He is remembered by many as a fair and hard-working man and a loving grandfather and great-grandfather. His own children had limited contact with him. Several of them confronted him individually about what he had done to their mother, about what they had seen and heard. He claimed to have no memory of it. No one recalls whether PC ever mentioned Emma's notoriety, but they agree he must have known. According to his son Nelson, he made one dying request in his final days. He wanted to see Emma. He wanted her to come stand in his doorway just for a moment. The woman who had walked more than 10,000 miles since she left him refused to take those steps. Her family did not attempt to keep tabs on her whereabouts. She'd simply disappear from Gallia County and return home with a new batch of stories. "Saw an Indian on one of my hikes," she told a reporter in Huntington, chuckling in 1972. "Last summer, up back of Rutland. I had climbed the ridge and started down the other side. Just as I placed a limb across the fence, I looked up and saw a man in the woods. He had a gun. I hadn't lived this long only to end up being shot in the woods, so I said, 'Don't shoot. I'm Grandma Gatewood. I tromp these woods all the time.' I could tell by his features that he was an Indian, at least part, and his expression showed that he had never heard of anyone by the name of Gatewood. Pretty soon another fella came up. He told me they came from Portsmouth, were hunting grouse, and sure enough the man with him was part Indian. 'He knows more about the woods than anyone I know,' he said. The first man smiled, looked at me and said, 'I've seen lots of things in the woods, but you're the most unusual sight I've ever come across.'" She added distance to a total tally until she had walked more than 14,000 miles, more than halfway around the earth, putting her in the slim company of astonishing pedestrians.